In this video, we will dive into the movie The Final Destination 5. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide reviews and personal reactions. So let's begin with the movie story. Final Destination 5 is one of those rare movies where the title itself is a spoiler. Yes, everyone in the movie dies except for Colonel Bloodworth, but you know that because of the previous 4 films, the increasingly challenging task for the filmmaker is to devise ever more horrible and gruesome method for them to be slaughtered. Final Destination 5 shows a lot of ingratitude, the recurring theme that time will be showering and lots of it. The characters have names, but they might as well be called after items from a shish kebab, lamb, chicken, mushrooms, onions, tomatoes, some nice peppers. I like to use green, red, and yellow. The actors in a movie like this are essentially doing product placement by getting their names and faces out there as a splatter movie. They can perhaps catch the eye from a casting agent and get a shot at a decent film. They have studied their craft. They have struggled and dreamed. They have attended countless auditions. Now at last they have a role in a major Hollywood release and can call home, Mom, I get impaled by the mast of sailboat after I fall off a bridge. The fact is the performances are all effective. The actors bring more to the film than it brings to them. The caliber of performance in gruesome death movies has considerably improved since Herschel Gordon Lavish made the Gore Cars. The direction by Steven Quale is efficient and the special effects do an excellent job of beheading, exaggerating, devastating, squishing, and so on. I am amused by this great screenplay by Eric Heister based on character created by Geoffrey Reddick. Reddick, of course, was the writer of the original Final Destination 2000. Since all of the characters in that film were dead by movie's end, his credit might more reasonably have read based on characters killed by Geoffrey Reddick. I speak too soon. Bloodworth, Tony Todd always survived this task to find even more ominous ways of saying I told you so. Reddick should also be given full credit for devising the egregious logic of the first film, which instead of many proofs that we cannot cheat death. This struck the original character with a force that has now been much dilated. You don't appear in a Final Destination movie and expect to get out alive. I expect this movie to make a lot of money at the box office, spent by fans eager to see still more cool ways for hot young character to be slaughtered. My review will not be read by any of these people. They know what they enjoy. They don't want no damn movie that damn surprises. I am always pleased when moviegoers have a good time. Perhaps they will return to a theater and someday see a good movie by accident and it will start them thinking. 11 years into the franchise and audience know what to expect when they buy a ticket to Final Destination 5. The latest is the series is a solid, fun installment that delivers what the fan wants: over the top, elaborate and wildly cartoonish death scene in 3D because the kids love 3D. Nicholas D'Angosh, heroes fired up, starts as Sam, who we meet while he is on his way to a corporate retreat with a blasted of co-workers, including his newly estranged girlfriend Molly, The Walking Dead's Emma Bell. While the bus sits idling thanks to construction on a bridge, Sam has the request Final Destination premonition, seeing the horrific bridge collapse that is about to occur, killing them all. Sam's warning about what is going to happen, all heeded by a select few of his co-workers, and well, you know the rest. The bridge does indeed collapse, and those who survived count themselves lucky to be alive until they begin dying one by one because you cannot cheat death. When a formulaic series gets to movie number 5, you begin to appreciate any little difference that set it apart from the rest. This I was happy and rather surprised to discover the main character in Final Destination 5 were all adults working at a paper company, not one high school kid in the bunch. Okay, the vast majority of the cast, including Miles Fisher, Jacqueline MacInnes-Wood, Arlen Escarpeta, and Ellen Voorhees, happen to be young and attractive, but that's par for the course. By the way, the fact that having any story focusing on the employees of a paper company is now going to evoke The Office doesn't seem lost on a filmmakers who amusingly cast Todd Baker himself, David Koechner as the office manager. I also enjoyed P.B. Brand's coffee performance as the guy in the office who is lecherous, thriving and casually racist, and thus just asking for a nice, long prolonged death scene. Yes, of course, the bread and butter of this series are the death and the glorious death. The Final Destination 5 has some excellent ones. You know exactly when these sequences are beginning, even without the flickering lights and spooky wind and such, and it all becomes about the growing anticipation followed by the big payoff, the screw that seems ready to rip off. The dripping water, the unattended machine throughout the film, directed by Steven Quale, does a great job of setting the scene and creating a nice amount of tension as we near the inevitable moment of doom for these characters, which often includes a bit of a savor when it comes to what seems like to be the most obvious cause of their demise: kitchens, factories, LASIK surgery office, college gymnastics. Once again, this series will make you afraid of doing, well, anything, anywhere. Let's be the Final Destination to death. It's nice to see the always cool Tony Todd reprise his role as Bloodworth, the mysterious coroner who always knows more than he should about this whole death as a planned thing. Expect for an audio cameo in the third film. Todd's been MIA from this series since Final Destination 2. Upon his return, he brings a ton of his usual gravity, humor, and manic to the role, through having seen him show up for a scene here and there now in 3 Final Destination movies. I hope the next sequel, come on, you know it's coming, might finally go a bit more into the backstory on his overly knowledgeable follow. Screenwriter Eric Heiser, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, does a serviceable job hitting the beats we all expect from the series. Let's face it, these movies are about getting from set piece to set piece, and no one watching really cares if Sam and Molly can work out their relationship woes. The one major new element in this movie out is the idea that if these survives kill someone else, they can save themselves. It's an intriguing new addition to the storyline. I wish a bit more had been done with it, and that we had seen more of the characters have some true turmoil over this potential out, rather than choose it to fall a bit of the psycho slasher conclusion that seems a bit forced. Fortunately, the very ending of Final Destination 5 contains a clever little turn of events that is an affectionate nod to the history of the series, which is appreciated, considering the Final Destination series have had almost no ties to one another since the second film. Final Destination 5 is a much improved installment of the series on the heels of the terrible fourth film. The Final Destination and an example of getting what you pay for it in a stable, satisfying manner. Now let's talk about the 3D, since with the fourth film, it's a much taught aspect of the movie that the studio is pushing hard. Personally, I am sick of death of 3D. I have seen great 3D and I have seen creepy 3D, but in the past 2 years, it's all become, well, a blur. Yes, I have simply seen too much 3D, and I hate to argue with the king of the world, James Cameron, but the vast majority of the time, I don't find 3D to be all that immersive and to help draw me into a film that I can disturb missing. Even when it's done well, it makes me hyper aware of the technical aspect of the film and the fact that I am sitting there wearing uncomfortable glasses rather than simply getting swept up in the story like a great movie can do. Cameron has also spoken out against Koechner type 3D, the classic B-movie horror movie use of 3D, where things cut and poke out at you, often chemically drawing attention to themselves in the process, which is amusing because Final Destination 5 director Quale is a Cameron critic who's worked on a ton of his films and co-directed Ghost of the Deep with Cameron, and yet he is making exactly the kind of 3D movie Cameron has explained about. And guess what? It looks great. Quale knows his way around his technology. He was a second unit director on Avatar and uses it in very effective and clever ways. At this point, being so burnt out on 3D in general, Final Destination 5 is the only kind of 3D movie that I can have a lot of fun with, because no one is going to see this movie to get immersed in a complex story and characters. But seeing some poor girls intensely shoot out at the camera in 3D, now that's just a good time at the movies. So yes, in a summer where I have basically scorned 3D altogether, I can endorse Final Destination 5 and say 3D is the best way to see this movie, even though the higher price still sucks. Despite the fact that the Final Destination series was supposed to have come to an end with Final Destination 4, here we are again. Due round of kids, some all spectre death, always up to some shot of Rube Goldberg, Skeshnian. By now, this franchise has established itself as the go-to series for seeing people killed in intensive, gruesome ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Final 4 was generally terrible, the first film in the series to make me question whether or not all the scenes are not drenched in viscera get worth suffering through in order to get to the money shots. Would Final Destination 5 return the franchise to its not great, not even good but watchable for the skills glory? Find out in her interview. None of the Final Destination films are referred to their actual titles by the characteristic of the big ass accident that kickstart each film. Final Destination 2 for intents in the car wreck one, while Final Destination 3 is the roller coaster one. Final Destination 4, the NASCAR one, was the one that seems to kill the franchise off once and for all, largely because of the film's awful script and the somehow even more awful acting that prematured the film. Just try getting through the film's opening 10 minutes without wanting to punch every character on screen in the face. But also because, well, this was the fourth iteration of the series and everything's gotta wrap up sooner or later, right? That's what New Line Cinema thought anyway. That's instead on calling the fourth film the Final Destination and came this close to release it directly to DVD. Then they said, what the hell, dropped it into theaters and made a surprising amount of money during the flick's opening weekend. That of course led to Final 5, the bridge disaster one, and well, here we are, staring down the barrel of the fifth go-round with the world's unlikeliest horror franchise, yes, even more likely than the Saw franchise. Upon learning that the franchise was taking a victory lap, I was not thrilled, but the possibilities inherent in Final Destination death scene plus 3D was pretty compelling, and at worst these films has always been watching at least once. The Bridge Disaster one is definitely the best Final Destination the series has been in a long while, probably the best since the second and maybe just as good. But I am sad to report that the viewing experience is not as fun at home as it was in theater. For one thing, these movies are always best enjoyed with a shrieking crowd. For another, New Line has made the curious decision to release the Bridge Disaster one in 2D. I just bought a big ass 3D LED television about a month ago, and while I have been using the set primarily for gaming, you should see Arkham Asylum and Assassin's Creed in 3D, your face will melt. I am confess that I was kind of hoping to see the Bridge Disaster one at home in 3D. I cannot imagine this will be a common complaint, however, as most people still don't own 3D TVs. Otherwise, this one's one of the better Final Destination films and has the distinction of being the only film in the franchise that actually gave me nightmares. I was the latter eyes surgery scene, which plays upon a very particular fear I have of anything being jammed into my ocular cavities. Not your mom has the same fear. Once again, a group of teenagers narrowly escape death, and once again, two or three of their friends are killed off by the looming, unseen specter of death before they realize that something's amiss, and once again, they are forced to speak to Tony Todd in order to figure out what the hell's going on. Finding out how the script will work, a Tony Todd appearances into each new Final Destination is one of the series' strongest, most satisfying highlights. The kills are crazier in this one, and then I remember them being in installment past, and by the end, just about everyone's dead. You know what you are getting into here. The only thing that really changes from film to film is the incident that kicks off the plot as it's there. In this one, it's a massive bridge collapse. This scene is probably the highlight of the film, with the possible exception of that still scarm-inducing eyeball scene, and appears to be where most of the film's budget went. There's a level of quality on display in this sequence that's not readily apparent in some of the other scenes, particularly in some of the obvious set building that had been done by director Steve Quale. It may be the worth nothing that I found the character in this one far more unlikable as a group and individually than any other Final Destination cast. Did this make the kill scene even better? I suspect it did, particularly for the loudmouth Dutchy Nuzzle that get his is an acupuncture clinic. One final note, not pun intended, I really like the ending on this one, very clever indeed and completely unexpected the first time I saw the film. If you have been holding off on seeing this one but you have at least seen the first film in the series, the ending alone is worth renting this one for. The extras are scant, a few behind the scenes fractured on the film's bigger disaster scene, a few alternate death scenes, no commentary. The video quality is solid and the film's run at a quick 92 minutes. Beyond all that, however, I'm finding it difficult to come up with much to say about this one. Either the Final Destination films blow your skirt up or they don't. If you have been amused by the series in the past, this one's certainly worth a rental, but I honestly cannot imagine this one's worthy owning, if not completed anyway, unless they are also releasing a 3D version. This movie was seen a part of the Movie Feast, the rather wonderful film festival organized by Vincent and everybody else over at movies.ea. It was well worth attending and I am already looking forward to next year. Good job all. Okay, if you are watching this, I am going to assume that it means you are interested in the Final Destination series. I mean, at a fifth installment, it's hard to argue that the audience doesn't know what to expect, especially in a series like this, which is built around a particular gimmick. In this case, the gimmick happens to be turning the entire world into a Rob Goldberg machine of death. So the question is not really whether the film works as a self-contained entity or whether the entire concept works. We have had 4 films to determine whether the very idea of Final Destination 5 appeals to you. So let's just focus on, if you pardon the pun, the execution this time around. For the record, I have a bit of the soft spot of Final Destination, the original film in the series. It was at the time a rather clever little concept in a horror subgenre that was rapidly focusing on torture videos and serial killer to keep it alive. All credit to James Wong and Glenn Morgan. It was a good idea. It was innovative and quirky, and dare I say it, originally in a genre that had seemed stale of quite some time. So I am not adhere to the core idea, even if the law of diminishing return does set in after 5 films. To be honest, I mostly recall the quirky deaths rather than remembering any of the films. So I remember bits like the death inside, a tanning salon, or a crazy highway crash, or a sudden ambulance smashing out of stage left. I could not place any of these deaths in the context of the film. But they made an impact on me based on the simple fact I can remember them. So that's really the standard of the grim set piece that we are looking at. I had argued that at least one and maybe two deaths match the sort of memorability factor. I don't think it's possible to spell them since the movie is candid about when it's not who a character is about to die. But let's just say I'm not contemplating laser eye surgery anytime soon and leave it at that. So that's not bad for a film that 8 death sequences to produce 2 that rank with probably the most messed up of the series. The rest are okay and some are downright disappointing, but I suppose you are really playing the law of average here. Sometimes you get what you want. If you have been a fan of the previous entries in the Final Destination series, the 5th entry is ready to prove that this franchise has not given into death just yet. A sequel like this one could feel like more of the game, yet the magnificence of going over the top with ridiculous death in half of the charm of the series. People are going to die in a stern order, but the other appeal is that you never know what is going to get them and when. At least first should be the setup, and that's exactly what Final Destination 5 gets right. Director Steven Quale and screenwriter Eric Hester embrace the inevitability of the deaths, but don't telegraph the how. Along the way, we are treated to 2 outstanding set pieces, even more deaths, and pleasing use of 3D where it counts. The film plays as more black comedy than horror, but there are cringeworthy moments that don't involve the gore. Hit the jump for my full review. Sam and his co-workers are off on a company team building retreat when he has an eerily realistic vision of a horrific bridge collapse. When he wakes, they are on that very bridge and he managed to convince his former girlfriend Molly and a handful of co-workers including Nathan, Candice, Olivia, Isaac, Peter and their boss Dennis to get up in time to see it go down. They count themselves as lucky, but death has a habit of collecting on its dues. One by one, the survivor meets increasingly absurd and gruesome deaths. As they write what is going on, they race to cheat death with varying degrees of success. Hester and Quale do a great job of setting up the premise without too much fluff getting in the way. Final Destination 5 is lean, clocking in at 95 minutes, and the kills come early with frequent use of 3D to gruesome effects. Even the title credits show us the extra dimension and got the crowd eager for the action to begin. Speaking of beginnings, the opening set piece of the bridge collapse left me giddy. Every cast member seems to meet a vastly different demise, with Candice taking the top award, something she managed to do once more. They are grisly and the sequence throws smart and interesting obstacle in their path. The collapse itself feels thought out and well researched, something a lazy sequel would never spend the time to do. The entire sequence looks gratifying real, but it is always risky going this far in the first quarter of the film. Luckily, that risk pays off because Quale turns in some gruesome kills. The highlight of the film outside of the bridge sequence has to be the gymnastic set piece. The mood is set as we watch danger after danger pull up around Sandys. And you can feel the tension of the crowd building as we watch her avoid as one hurdle to simply stumble upon another. The sequence comes to an outrageously brutal demise that managed to feel rewarding in a sick way. Perhaps that is the raw of the death sequence. A character in the film even mentioned how increasingly absurd the deaths are, and it may be that factor that lets us view this as humorous. We cannot imagine this many things going wrong in our own demise, so we simply laugh and shrug it off as dark comedy. Whatever your reasoning may be, the film delivers on its promise. Hester even brings quite a bit of humor to the proceedings, with Isaac, a cocky tech sport guy, the leading love intruder. Brand plays the character as a smooth-talking ladies man to hilarious effect and managed to have one of the best moments at a memorial service. The rest of the cast have at least a single one-liner to deliver some chuckle, and they mostly hold their own as this team, short and act frantic during key moments. D'Agostino is an especially crucial component to the film, and he pulls off the leading role, this charm and fear. Despite all of this, there are a few hang-ups that still linger. Peter is the weakest of the characters in the film. There is not much to like about him, and he seems to be the most morose of the bunch. There is a moment where he has to pull off an important scene, and it feels rather flat. Additionally, the use of David Koechner as a boss feels out of place and more overtly comedic than dull. His character comes off as a buffoon, something none of the other characters fall prey to. Even the chemistry between Sam and Molly managed to leave me without a care of whether they work out or not. As a whole, Final Destination 5 is noticeably hollow without the crawl set piece, and fear that it will not reach much beyond its core audience. For those that are fans, there is much to be happy about, including a satisfying ending. I will not pretend to be a host of the series as a whole, as I have picked out on a few iterations, but the film had me thrilled throughout. Final Destination 5 is a quick popcorn flick that might keep hold of people that have not turned in for a few sequels. Even newcomers will be guided along well enough to thoroughly enjoy the film without any prior context. Some of the more brutal moments of the film utilize 3D to either throw something at you or bring you into the scene. With a film where everything is cranked up to a level beyond, 3D continually helps the over-the-top nature come through, stylish, gruesome, and at times hilarious. Final Destination 5 delivers on the goods it promises, and it does not worry about the rest. The Final Destination 5 movie reviews. This occult horror franchise has been going for a decade now, and like the Scream movies is made by and for hardline connoisseurs of the genre. The form and content are as accurate and unchangeable as a patrician sonnet or a Noah play starring with a young person having a permutation of the catastrophic accident that saved the lives of a member of people, most of them from his own circle. But the Grim Reaper is not mocked, and all the seemingly lucky ones are doomed to die with maximum gore in the order in which they survive. Each death is the culmination of the concatenation of smaller accidents that detail observes in low motion. The player provided by the films resides in the ingenuity shown by the writers and directors, and the way punishment is delivered equally to the innocent and the deserving. The latest one, the second using 3D image aggressively aimed at the audience, begins with the horrendous collapse of a packed suspension bridge over a river in New York. The 8 survivors are employees of a company about to be closed down in the current crisis, are lined up like Christie 10 Little Indians, to use the politically correct little imposed on Dame Agatha's classic thrill in the 1960s, and then disposed of gleefully in a manner that recall Gloucester remake in King Lear that has flies to what boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their spots. The most extravagant quotes involve a gymnast ending up twisted beyond unraveling, a lecherous patron of a Chinese message parlor experiencing death by acupuncture and a falling Buddha, and an ophthalmologist laser surgery going horrible wrong. I have to admit it appealed to my wanton inner child thrive. If asked to name my favorite premonition movie, it would be Alton Studio classic Dead of Night. Final Destination 5. The series is still a cheap burger, but this entry is seasons just right. Look, the Final Destination series is arguably the mad lids of modern day studio filmmaking, more so than any other franchise in recent history. The ongoing Death Strike Zone saga is basically a fill in the blank template with a few real deviations from the formula. If you have not liked any of the sequels, you will not like this one either. It is too much to hope for that the series will return to the genuine quality that started it back in 2000. The first Final Destination was a real movie. It was a moving, sober, and character-driven horror fable that dealt in real time with grief, loss, frustration, and the often arbitrary nature of death itself. The sequel that followed have been to varying degrees gore cartoon whereby a bunch of pretty couple survive and over to top tragedy and then get picked off one by one in various Rube Goldberg-esque fashions. The last film did not even bother to try to be a real movie, and it failed to even deliver on the blood-splattering money shots that would have justified its existence. This new entry is a marked improvement and it may even be the best sequel in the series. Give or take your admiration for Final Destination 2. It is indeed the same old meal you have been eating for 11 years with mostly the same ingredients, but it is prepared better than this time around with just enough new species and marinade to make it tastier. The plot, you are getting right? Okay. 2 dozen employees embark on a bus trip heading for a company retreat. One of them gets a premonition that the bridge is about to collapse, so he ditches the bus and several of his friends and our co-workers follow him. Nothing happens and he is fired for screwing up the retreat. I kidding. The bridge does indeed collapse, killing 80 something people in the usual spectacular fashion. And as we all expect, the survivors eventually realize that Death had a plan for them and Death plans to collect on his respective lost souls. We know this because Tony Todd tells us so, and because I imagine anyone walking into Final Destination 5 has seen at least one or two of the previous entries. Anyway, so it goes. Pretty people nearly escape death, then pretty people die off one by one in the usual grotesque fashion. It's the same old recipe, but it's cooked with a bit more care this time around. For one thing, there is a token attempt at character development or at least character differentiation this time around. The film is nearly 15 minutes longer than the previous entry and it allows for just a bit of plot and a narrative. You may not care about the lead couple deciding whether or not to break up after one of them gets a prestige cooking apprenticeship in Paris, and you may not give a crap about one African American employee struggle with resist co-workers, but the effort is slightly appreciated. I did appreciate that the characters this time around are adults, which means they have adult responsibilities and options. While I still miss the key concept of Final Destination 2 that the survivors were all strangers who came from varying walks of life, this one is a step in the right direction. I still wish the series would return to the potency of the first film, the only one where you actually were rooting for the characters to live. But that die was cast back in 2000 when test screening audience demanded a jokey final for the initial installment instead of the intended downer ending. What this segment does get right is what most of the audience paid to see: the death scenes. The initial bridge collapse is suitably epic and gruesome, and it is a nice return to form after the somewhat contained initial disaster of the last two sequels. One could argue that using a real life catastrophe for this kind of film is a bad taste, but this kind of film is not intended for those who might be offended by such things. The stand-alone death scene that follows are among the best in the series history. There is one sequence involving a gymnasium and a stage crew that is a pitch-perfect example of the old bomb under the table stick. It was so skillfully shot and edited that yes, it earns comparison to Hitchcock and the punchline in a corker. There are several genuinely inventive death scenes that truly explored the Rube Goldberg ideology that has fueled the series of the beginning. The film actually has a subtext of its own, as director Steven Quale takes unending delight in pointing out the myriad of various dangers that exist in everyday life. The kitchen of an upscale restaurant becomes a giant room of would-be booby traps. The suspenseful foreplay and many shots are all delivered in generally high-quality 3D. Quale has been a long-time special effect technician and eventually second unit director for James Cameron, and it's clear that he knows what he is doing with that much abused third dimension. This is the rare live-action movie that not only is worth seeing in 3D but should be seen in 3D. The opening credits are pretty spectacular, but in the end it is still a Final Destination sequel. The plot is the same as it always is, and the characters are pretty thin. There are some nice touches here and there. The hot brunette with glasses is retreated as still being hard despite, or in my opinion, because sad glasses, the lesson of our story is keep the glasses, be hot or live longer. And the would-be token black guy cleverly avoid that most of horror films clutches. And speaking of clever, the ending, which I will not even hint at, is a wonderful treat that should delight long-time fans and gently shock newbies. Final Destination 5 is a genuine improvement after two poor sequels. It is the same cheap meals you have been eating since 2000, but the recipe is just plain tastier than most of what's come before. If you are not a fan of the series, this is certainly no time to jump in, but if you are a fan of the first and our second entries, this honor this most formulaic of the franchise by making sure that the formula is in service of a genuinely fun bit of trash. There may be a back-ended compliment, but so it goes. Final Destination 5 is a darn good Final Destination film for whatever that's worthy. The Final Destination 5 movie is saying that the Final Destination 5 is better than Final Destination 4 is kind of like me saying that the second amputation was less painful than my first. It still doesn't mean that given the choice I'd choose the second amputation. If you have loved all the Final Destination films, poor you, then there's almost no doubt that you will actually embrace the fifth in the series of films. If you have obeyed the Final Destination films, then the fact that 5 is better than 4 is irrelevant. You will still hate it, I promise. The truth is that I don't really backroad anyone a good time at a movie theater. I want you to be happy, and sometimes that means being happy seeing a movie that I just don't give a damn about. Actually, that happens quite often, as it's true for most film critics, because we see probably 10 to 20x more films a year than the average moviegoer. I am a bit pretentious, demanding and downright picky when it comes to my cinema. As long as a filmmaker is not being lazy and is not digressing the art of filmmaking, I am willing to let go of my ego and simply be happy when you find a movie that you enjoy. There are people who enjoy these Final Destination films, and it does not matter that the virtually always repeat themselves films after film. It does not matter that the acting is modest at best, the script is painted by numbers and the special effect, even in 3D, leave much to be desired. Final Destination 5 is a 3D popcorn flick for those who want to spend 90 minutes watching gory death and occasionally gruesome objects coming at them on the big screen in 3D. It has nothing else to offer, but for many who will choose to see it, that will be enough. So be it. To describe the film's plot is pointless. You know the basic storyline because it's been the same basic storyline for all 5 films. Much to my surprise, I enjoy Final Destination 5 much more than I have the other Final Destination films, including perhaps even the first one. That doesn't mean I enjoy it, but I hated it for less and it irritated me for less. In other words, perhaps director Steven Quale was actually trying a bit here. After a bombshell star, Quale actually get a bit creative and tosses a few minor variations on the usual Final Destination action, and even more surprising, there's a bit of a twist going on in while in the script by Eric Heiser, who also penned the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street Trado. For the first time that I can remember, there's actually character development in a Final Destination film. Admittedly, it's a fundamental character development, but at least it's present. The Final Destination 5 movie, there were a lot of things I didn't expect from Final Destination 5, but the movie is well developed, and there's a close humor to the death sequence that giggly invites your applause, but the films also want us to be appalled by how and when death comes to us. After bearing witness to the soulless with which Final Destination 3 penetrated to audience and the hilarious means by which some critics tried to rationalize James Wong's vulgar trivialization of death as a 9/11 allegory, it was not a surprise to see a post-snacks on a plane David R. Ellis run into the open like the clueless began chasing meat puppet from the Final Destination 2 and allow the 3D format to crush his fear for visual suffocation and pop excitement in the Final Destination. It almost kills me then to say that Steven Quale's Final Destination 5 brings sanity to a single-minded broken record of a franchise that has, until now at least, seems predisposed against truthfulness. If the series really does end here, may this final installment be hailed as a triumph of poetic justice. Final Destination 5 doesn't stray too far from the series' familiar formula. Expected steps as the existential discord go beyond the superficial and jockey, and the drama of its characters coming to grip with the inevitable is notable for its patient sensitivity and overall leaks of clemency. In the beginning, Nicholas D. Agosto, aspiring chief Sam, has an elaborate premonition of death from which he saves his girlfriend and his fellow co-workers at the Presage Paper Company. But death cannot be cheated, as coroner Tony Todd eventually reminds us. And one by one, Sam and his friends die horrifically, and in the same exact order they would have been dispatched had they stayed on the film's opening death trap, Game Norris, Point Better Bridge, and that's just a metal and concrete strange of DNA. Through the magic of some mightily impressive CGI, the film's opening set piece, during which the bridge falling concrete and metal wires along with the cars and other objects it sends flying off its surface, crush and slice over 80 people, comes close to besting the teeth-gnashing brinkmanship of Final Destination 2's visually premistic freeway bloodstorm. But what truly dignifies this sequence, like others in the film, is not just its surprisingly graceful construction. A gymnasium set scenario is a particularly excellent example of cross-cutting from beginning to end. But how human error is so momently factored into the logistic of the human mousetrap that the characters badly suspect the hand of a supernatural force. The smallest shards of character development go a long way here. The moment where Sam's boss tastes one of the kids' pasta dishes, which a customer returns because the meat sauce is tasteless, is not one that any other Final Destination would have made room for. But this great little side illuminates Sam's insecurities, his sad and resigned view of himself as an inactive participant in this fate, feelings that likely explain why Molly breaks up with him prior to the bridge collapse. And just as the reason for their relationship demise are left unspoken, so is their reconciliation. The one imagine it has something to do with Sam finally taking this life by the horns, boldly living it in spite of the death that awaits him. If not tomorrow, that in the distant future he hopes to still be sharing with his girlfriend. The film seems to constantly set out to refute the moral void of Final Destination 2 and the laziness of the not so Final Destination. It's Sam's refusal to safeguard himself like the dummies from the previous film against anything that may kill him. And in his friend's Peter, surprisingly moving struggle to ward off death. One man's became essential struggle contrasts nicely with the other's pining on. Yes, the film make a spectacle of death, but it also make a spectacle of human guilt and moral crisis. A commentary on race, youth, and class even works itself out in the lead up to one death sequence, which features like most in the film and unlike most in previous installments of the franchise. Characters doing things that are typically not without the risk of danger, and in one notable exception, there's a Golo Homer to the death sequence that greatly invites the audience applause. But Final Destination 5 also warns us to be appalled by how and when death can come to us, and finally how it unites us all. And sometimes character across the series, the set piece are not just elaborately staged joke with the nastiest of punchlines, as they are also in questions. One eye-searing sequence holds an uncomfortably cheeky mirror up to our fascination with seeing those sorts of spectacles and in more than two dimensions. Final Destination 5 then is a Final Destination film with layers, and it may be the only one in which a hero is called out for how selfishly they behave within their own premonitions. The premonition may give them the playbook they need to try and save human lives, but it also reminds us that there's no greater pain than knowing when death is at one's door. The Final Destination movie plot is that after having a terrible vision of the collapsing suspension bridge, one man saves many of his co-workers' lives right before the bridge falls to the water below. This, of course, is a Final Destination movie, and we all know that death does not like to be cheated. One by one, the survivors suffer a serious gruesome accident, only to find that there may be another way to save themselves from a bloody fate. In the end, number 5 in the franchise revived the once regional horror series to one of their summer's best horror outings. A funny thing happens on the way to Final Destination 5, to be honest. A series of spectacular comedic yet gruesome death didn't seem that appealing going into the theater this time around. The desire to watch flickering candles and other sign of the grim reaper didn't feel the stimulating after catching the yawn-inducing the Final Destination Part 4. Yet after I sat down and the fourth sequel begins, the interest returned. As early as the best of kills from the franchise opening credits, it felt that there may be something special here. In fact, there is something very special in what is not only the best installments in the original,
but by far the best 3D of the summer. This is all shots of broken glass, body parts, and you name it flying in your face core, and it is fun as hell. The horrible accident that claims a number of lives this time around is a massive suspension bridge, which is scary enough as it is. When one young man saves his co-workers after having one of the FD famous visions, the Gold Oath Reaper once again comes to take a few souls. While the death on and off the bridge are bloody well impressive, it helps that the cast is a likable punch that is not hindered too much by stereotype and nuances. The survivors this time around are quite a talented twosome with Nicholas D'Agostino and Amabel creating a very charismatic leading couple. The script by Eric Heiser put the focus on character near as much as the first film without sacrificing the thrill ride quality of the Final Destination film in 3D. Speaking of character, D'Agostino sure makes up a solid leading man who must deal with the terrifying vision of death and destruction. It would be easy for him to take it too far or not far enough. Yet he and his girlfriend Molly had a surprisingly real relationship that helps anchor the movie when it gets deep into the guts and gore of it all. Tony Todd is also back as well he should be. This is as much as the franchise as it is the fraud-burning sense of Tom. This must too knowledgeable corner understand what is happening and provide a little airy explanation as to what is happening to those who escape the grand design. Todd is the perfect horror movie leading man, and this series was truly missing something, not utilizing this fascinating actor. He seems right at home in the role, and it is refreshing that he has returned. It was also refreshing to see David Koechner and continuity be, hence adding a little credibility to the proceedings. Koechner as the company supervisor and Vance as the suspicious agent Block who is investigating the bizarre accident, and both performances are terrible. The rest of the cast including Arlen, PJ Bryan, Ellen, Jacqueline and Miles Fisher should also be commended. This is one of the most amiable groups of four to show up in a horror flick in some time. Director Steven Quale, directors of the Final Destination 5, knowing full well what made the series as creepy as it was. Sure, it ups the ante on the gore, death gets pretty creative this time around, and nearly every single kill is cringe-worthy. Yet there is more to it than that. The suspense leading to the character demise is emergently intense. In fact, it is downright excruciating at times, from a single nail on a balancing beam to a nightmarish massage. There are several moments that will shock and disturb. When the producer claimed this to be darker than the painfully disappointing fourth film, they were not kidding. Final Destination 5 managed to pay tribute to the original yet still aim up the gross mention on every level. The 3D work as it should in a film like this, especially with the witty opening credits. Frankly, this is the best example of 3D there has been in a very long time. Final Destination 5 is a success on every level, from the insurmountable tension, surprisingly solid performances, and inventive gore shots. 5 times look to be charmed for this successful series. Death has truly gotten better with age, and this time he may have a few twists up this sleeve. Along with the Saw franchise, the Final Destination series has become one of the most recognizable horror properties in the modern SANCAP. While films like Indicious have succeeded in delivering new and compelling horror scares, there is no doubt that audiences still enjoy the familiarity.
as well as increasingly complicated formulaic setup in the horror comedy Final Destination films. While the films are without a type short of movie-going mystery with stiff performances, subtle dialogue, and a preference for style over substance, there's no doubt that despite some ups and downs, overall the franchise has succeeds in entertaining audience for over a decade. Can the latest century Final Destination 5 deliver another tense and enjoyable time at the theater in 3D? Surprisingly, the answer is yes, and even more surprisingly, the success of the film owes a lot to director Steven Quale's use of 3D. Where Saw 3D turned out to be a gimmicky cash grab with a very few interesting applications of the format, Final Destination 5 often catches the audience off guard and plays against expectations through its use of 3D. Obviously, things fly out of the screen, but this is not a film that's attempting to create a rich and immersive experience. It's about toying with anticipation as well as delivering cathartic over the top payoffs. Most audience members are burning out on run of the mill 3D, but even Nasris will have to admit that Final Destination 5 makes interesting and at times cringe-inducing use of the format. By now, the basic Final Destination premise should be familiar to most moviegoers. Each installment begins with an humorous action set piece, in this case, a suspension bridge collapse, and that kills off character after character in a variety of shocking and grisly ways, until the entire sequence is revealed to be a premonition. Final Destination 5 centers around Sam Lawton, who, after a brief moments of deja vu, remember his gruesome visions and drag several of his co-workers off the aforementioned bridge before the collapse, subsequently saving them from their pre-ordained death. As a result, Death, who does not like to be cheated, spent the remainder of the film haunting the survivors one by one, using a string of complicated real-world setup to reclaim their lives. Prior installment always toy with the solution to the inevitable death, i.e. cheating death again, new life, etc., to give the characters motivation to press on. However, Final Destination 5, to its credit, offers a more straightforward solution. The survivors can kill another person to appease death, which may not only makes more sense than period films, but also drives the plot and characters forward in compelling and twisted ways. It's a subtle addition that surprisingly is a major focus of the story, but adds an interesting dynamic as well as a few extra surprised by the end. As with the other movies in the series, most of the performances are pretty stiff and the characters are either underdeveloped or fit into predictable stock categories. That said, both Nicholas D'Agosto and Miles Fisher, who plays Sam's best friend Peter, have a surprisingly natural on-screen charisma. Especially given the ludicrous, narrow and flat dialogue they are expected to deliver. The rest of the cast is competent and never really distract from the events that are unfolding, but don't make much of an impression either. Most of the characters, as usual, are merely cannon feeder of the star of the film, death and its creative killing methods. As mentioned, the death sequence in Final Destination 5 benefit from the use of 3D, but even without the format, the set pieces will still satisfy, presenting some of the most outrageous kills of the franchise instead of a string of overly complicated real-world killing scenarios, which could become arcos as the film rolls on from one multi-step death to another. Final Destination 5 finds some intrigue ways to keep tension high Without continuously falling back on the formula, through there is still plenty of by the numbers killing to satisfy die-hard fans. The deaths are essentially effective this round because there's a different approach to each one by toying with expectation, body, horror, sympathetic, discomfort, and abrupt surprises. Each one keeps the audience invested in the moments to moment happening, but in a different way, was opposed to simply waiting for the ball to drop. Final Destination 5 logic gets a little talky by the closing credit through no Marius than in a period installment, but definitely delivers some fun surprises and a number of great nods to a overarching Final Destination franchise. It's arguably the second best entry in the series behind the original of course, and should please fans as well as serve as a good re-entry point into the storyline for film course that may have passed on the last few installments. That said, anyone expecting a sharp and thrilling horror narrative or an immersive scare flick that will probably be disappointed by Final Destination 5. But at this point, moviegoers know how to expect from the series elaborate over-the-top kills. There's no doubt that despite its shortcomings, Final Destination 5 delivers on those expectations and as a result offers a horror meme tour de force. If you're still on the fence about Final Destination 5, you can check the trailer also or watch the movie. One of the greatest horror movie plot twists of all time made this overwhelming sequel worth it. Which one of the greatest horror movie plot twists of all time, Final Destination 5 was able to save its overwhelming reputation, making the fifth installment worth the watch. Known for their elaborate setup, the Final Destination franchise has produced 5 memorable films so far, with the 6th movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, on the horizon as well following a set formula. Final Destination contains some of the most ridiculous deaths, providing a unique take on the horror genre through its lack of the physical villain and heavy focus on the inspecibility of fate. Each installment in the horror franchise is driven by a different character trying to choose Final Destination's death rule to teach their inevitable fate. With the new rule being added over time, Final Destination 5 established a different approach to the usual formula by introducing an interesting death rule which set it apart from other films. As Final Destination 5 was trying to recover the franchise from the disappointing reception of the Final Destination, the fourth and supposed last Final Destination movie, it is no surprise that the fifth horror movie entry also introduced a shocking twist to win audience over. Final Destination 5's timeline twist made the movie better in hindsight. Final Destination 5 featured a timeline twist which is hindsight made the movie better. At the end of Final Destination 5, Sam and Molly, who have managed to escape death for 2 extra weeks, notice a fight between some high school students as they board a plane to Paris. In a surprising development, the students are revealed to be Carter Horton and Alex Browning, making the flight they are boarding Wally Airline Flight 180 from the first Final Destination. This means that Final Destination 5, which fans thought to be a sequel, is actually a prequel to the whole franchise. Had they not included the shocking timeline twist in Final Destination 5, the movie may have followed the Final Destination disappointing fate. Ultimately, Final Destination 5's big reveal made the movie much more enjoyable, as the rest of the film was fairly standard. Despite Final Destination 5 having the second highest kill count, a new death rule,
and the best CGI. It mostly follows the usual formula and was marketed as the final film, leading people to expect more of the same had they not included the shocking timeline twist in Final Destination 5. The movie may have followed the Final Destination's disappointing fate. Therefore, when the ending introduced one of the best horror movie plot twists, it vitalized the movie. Final Destination 5's ending was great, but the movie was disappointing. While Final Destination 5's ending was great, the overall film was disappointing. Final Destination 5 follows a group of co-workers who defy their fated death in a bridge collapse and spend the rest of the movie trying not to die. Tony Todd returns as William Bloodworth in this movie for the first time since Final Destination 2, presenting a new or old depending on how it is viewed. Death rule: death can be cheated by making someone else's life. The setup makes the movie stand out from previous Final Destination film as it introduces a moral debate for the characters. Final Destination, the first one, audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 68%, and Final Destination 2, 58% ratings. Final Destination 3, 57% rating. Final Destination 4, 35% rating, and Final Destination 5, 53% Rotten Tomatoes score. However, despite the new death rule, timeline twist, and use of adult characters as opposed to the usual teen protagonist, Final Destination 5 has a 53% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, making it the second lowest rated Final Destination movie. After the Final Destination, audience complained that Final Destination 5 was rather predictable up until the ending. The characters were underdeveloped and that some of the deaths relied on CGI, making them look cheap. Therefore, it appears that the Final Destination franchise may need a different story in Final Destination 6 reboot in order to rectify the fifth film reputation. Final Destination Gang Full Circle set the stage for a reboot. Final Destination 5's timeline twist sent the franchise full circle by tying it up with the original film, setting the stage for a reboot. As a result, for Final Destination 5 being a surprise prequel, it wrapped the franchise up quite nicely. Therefore, when Final Destination 6 was confirmed, audiences were skeptical about how well the next movie might do considering the fatigue felt in the previous two films. However, after a 12-year hiatus, the Final Destination might experience a bit more success, especially with three co-directors, Zab Lekovsky and Adam B. Steen, set to direct Final Destination 6. Freak is a sci-fi thriller which follows a 7-year-old girl who leaves home for the first time after being hidden away by her father. Although Final Destination 6 has been called a reboot, it is being treated as a reimagining for the Final Destination franchise. Creator Geoffrey Reddick has explained that the premise of Final Destination 6 will be different, steering away from the original formula, which is a good idea considering it has become overused. The cast has been announced, with Tony Todd returning as Bloodworth, who will be a key part of the movie. Bloodworth was the expert on death roll in Final Destination, Final Destination 2, and Final Destination 5. Hopefully, the sixth installment will finally reveal his mysterious backstory. The ending of the Final Destination 5 fully explained. Horror movies are filled with all kinds of monsters, from swamp things to werewolf to apparitions. There's no shortage of things that go bump in the night. But one film series has made an antagonist out of the scariest boogeyman of them all, the very concept of death itself. The Final Destination series mainstreams a simple premise. One person sees a premonition of an impending disaster. They are able to avert said disaster along with a group of friends, a conscience, and as we have heard far too many times before, death does not like to be cheated out of a life. One by one, the characters miss grassaments, often as a result of some coveted Rude Goldberg machinations, because death always come to collect. For many, the hallmark of the franchise came with the 2011 installment Final Destination 5. It had some of the bloodiest death scene in the film series, and while it's still up in the air whether we will get Final Destination 6, this one serves as a worthwhile final. So where exactly did the movie leaves us? Here's all you need to understand about the ending of Final Destination 5. Final Destination 5 ends where the first film began. After going through an immeasurable amount of blood and death, everything seems to be looking up for Sam and Molly after having their relationship go through some serious back and forth throughout the movie. Sam decided it's finally time for them to travel to Paris for that cooking apprenticeship he so desperately wanted. Sadly, it doesn't seem like Paris is in the cards. When the two board a plane, they see a couple arc at the front. Fans of the franchise will undoubtedly recognize them as Alex Browning and Carter Horton from the original Final Destination. In that film, Alex was the one with the premonition who foresaw that the plane would explode mid-air. Sam and Molly are not lucky this time around as they remain on the plane when it takes off. Of course, Sam doesn't realize what's happening until it's too late, and the two doomed lovers try to survive to no avail one last time as the plane goes down. It provides a nice bit of symmetry to the series as a whole. It essentially functions on a cautious slope where the final film installment and where the first one began. This is unless another installment comes along. The Final Destination 5 is the most traumatizing death in the Final Destination franchise. The Final Destination franchise might be is the horror genre, but despite that, audience watch the film with a sense of fun. The catharsis horror is known for, where we can deal with our anxieties by laughing at or even enjoying the most fighting things on screen, is never more evident than in these films. It's sometimes hard not to laugh at absurd ways the creator of these movies come up with to kill their characters. A guy getting dice bowled by a swimming pool drain in the Final Destination or the tanning bed demise in Final Destination 3 are so over the top that we cannot take them seriously. They are gross and they may scream as they are not truly frightening outside of the jump scare effect of the moments. Then there's a Final Destination 5. The last film in the franchise has many twisted death scenes, but one moment is particular is so traumatizing and shocking that there is no fun and no loves to be found. It takes until the very last sense for it to happen, but when you see it play out, it's a moment you will never forget, even if you wish you could. Final Destination 5 is the best film in the franchise. The Final Destination franchise has been a moneymaker throughout the 2000s, but while 2009 fourth film, the Final Destination made more money than any other film in the series. It's also seen as the least impressive of the series. It felt like a paint by number movies.
introduce some blind characters, kill them off. The end, much of the inventiveness of the first three movies was gone. The Final Destination was going through the motions. The change with the fifth film in 2011, The Final Destination 5, that one right the wrongs of that came before it. We cared about the characters rather than seeing them as fodder that only existed to die gruesome death. Then there were the kills themselves, which aimed to be more scary than silly. Final Destination 5 follows Sam, his girlfriend Molly, and a group of friends who survived a brutally shot bridge collapse scenes in the first act. As these movies always go, the ones who escape death in the beginning and are then struck by it as the Grim Reaper looks to collect the ones who got away. The Final Destination movies are almost slasher films where the killer is not a man in a mask but the unfathomable afterlife itself. Some of the death scenes see one character crashing out of a high-rise window and another being shot in the back of the head with a nail gun. The most disgusting death involves Candice, a gymnastic who takes a deadly fall that ends with a broken neck and spine. Her body twisted in the most gruesome of poses. Still, not even that can match what happens in that final. The first Final Destination film gave audience a horror film they had never seen before. Horror was not is a great state in 2000. The 80s slasher boom and led to the pretty uninspired early 1990s outside of classics like Candyman and Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Then came another Wes Craven film in 1996, Scream, reinvented the slasher movie and reignited the horror genre. After Scream came a cluster of copycats. From I Know What You Did Last Summer to Urban Legend come 2000, however, the new trend was beginning to die out. Horror needed something fresh. Final Destination provided that it gave audience that slasher movie vibe and gory death, but in a clever new package. Here, death itself was the antagonist and invisible force out to collect those who escape it. This gave us the unexpected with a formula that we had not yet cracked. When people died in the most insane accident in Final Destination, it was truly frightening because it was new. Final Destination was bookended by an intrigue first and final act. The beginning sees a high school class boarding a plane set to fly to Paris. We follow these kids led by Devon Sawa's Alex as a shockingly minute into the film. Everyone dies when the plane blows up. Of course, it's just Alex having a premonition, and when the snaps out of it, he and a few other students get off the plane. He is treated like a crazy person until we watch from below as the plane then explodes on takeoff. While every film would follow the formula, none could live up to the impact of the first time we saw it happen. Alex tries to find a way to beat death as everyone around them dies, but even he cannot make it as the final image sees a falling sign take his life. The twist ending of Final Destination 5 leads to a heart-breaking ending. The end of Final Destination 5 sees a reunited Sam and Molly alive, and the couple eating together alone after hours at the fancy restaurant Sam works at. Another remaining survivor from the opening bridge collapse, the not so likable Peter, is in bad shape. Candice, the poor gymnastic and who ended up a blossy brittle, was his girlfriend. In these films, there is a way out of that snare. If you kill someone else, you can trade your life for theirs. Peter wants to do this but does not have the courage until they show up at the restaurant, deciding that he is going to shoot and kill Molly.
Sang, being the hero of the movie, stops him in a long kitchen brawl before ramming a shaver through Peter's back, killing him. Sam had traded his life for Peter's breaking death hold on him. Molly had barely escaped the bridge collapse in the opening premonition, so she was never on death list. Both of them are going to make it. 2 weeks later, Sam and Molly board a plane to Paris, where they are moving because Sam is due to start a culinary apprenticeship in the France city. Wait, they are on a plane to France. If you have seen the other films, you immediately start to get uncomfortable. As Sam is putting his stuff in an overhead compartment, he hears a combination and looks up. Some teenagers are being removed from the plane. These are not just any teens though, these are the characters from the first film. The twists have been revealed. Final Destination 5 is not a sequel, it's a prequel. Sam and Molly are on the plane that blows up in the first Final Destination. Sam and Molly thinks nothing of it until the plane is in the air and Sam overhears a stewardess telling a passenger about the kid having a panic attack who wanted off the plane because he had some kind of vision. Fear crosses Sam's face. He knows what's happening and there's nothing he can do. They watch helplessly as an engine explodes and the fuselage begins to rip apart. Molly is sucked out of the plane, but it's not quick, with Sam holding onto her hand, trying to save her until she is ripped away and then split in half over the airplane wing. The plane then explodes in slow motion, the flames consuming Sam as he screams in agony. And if that's not enough, Nathan, another survivor who escaped death, is killed on the ground when the plane crashes and he is crushed by an engine. The Final Destination franchise has fun with its kill. They are meant to make you squirm but also laugh at their silliness. Not here. Sam and Molly death are painfully tragic. Sure, many times the survivor die in the final scene, but not like this, so helpless to escape. Sam and Molly were happy. We cared about them. They were not just character stereotypes but felt like real people. When they die, it's not out of nowhere. Instead, we see it coming even before they do and then have to wait. There's no jump scare, just slowly winding dread. There's death are not held back on neither. It's not a quick 1 second splatter and cut to black. No, we see Molly screaming and hanging on for dear life. We see Sam screaming as fire takes him. It's brutal and grim and sad, with not an ounce of fun to be had and no love to be found. Final Destination 6 is in the work, but it's doubtful that it will have a sequence as painful and impactful as the final moment of Sam and Molly. Final Destination 5. Every main character who dies in every Final Destination movie. Here's a rundown of every main character who dies in the Final Destination franchise. The original Final Destination started life as an X-Files epic script dubbed Flight 180, which deal with Scully's younger brother having a premonition that a plane he is about to board is going to crash, which is what happens when he decided not to get on it. The writer Jeffrey Reddick then reworked the idea as a movie, with X-Files Drew Green-Morgan and James Wong later coming on board to return Final Destination into a hit movie. Final Destination never got paid a cent. Final Destination OG star gets candid about Final Destination 5 cameo amid actor strike. Devon Sawa, one of the original Final Destination stars, open up about his Final Destination 5 cameo, revealing the unpaid nature of it. In 2000, when Sawa was just getting his acting career off the ground, he started in the lead role of Alex Browning in Final Destination, which saw a group of teenagers avoid death on an airplane, only for it to come back for them through a series of grisly accidents. Having died off screen between sequels, Sawa made a surprise cameo return in Final Destination 5's twist ending through archival footage. As reported by comicbook.com, Sawa got unasked about his Final Destination 5 cameo is a now deleted tweet. Sawa explained that he was never even told that he has in the last Final Destination sequel, and he received no payment for the movie's inclusion for him, while subsequently acknowledging that the studio did technically have the right to use footage from the movie in the future. So check out his statement. I never got paid a cent for Final Destination 5. They didn't even tell me I was in it when they invited me to the premiere. In the first contract for part 1, there was a section that stated they owned the footage and could use it in the future. I assumed for press. I was wrong. There has nothing to do with the filmmaker, by the way. I loved FD5. I love them all, to be completely honest, and I am super excited to see number 6. Why David Sawa experience is relevant to SOG after a strike. Sawa did not explicitly mention the SOG after strike, but his story seems as the labor's union officially went on strike on July 14. His issue of likeness rights and residential touches one of the major issues that led to the SOG after strike, which is Hollywood studios' uses of the artificial intelligence likeness of actors. Sawa was included in Final Destination 5 using archival footage, but this is one on the way movies that can include actors without them physically being there. Many studios now can use CGI and deepfake to recreate the likeness of actors,